All right, let's get started. So, a little bit about me. My name is Mike. I work in IT. I've built about 5 gaming PCs for myself and various friends and helped coach many more. I have 7 certs in this industry and I kind of know what I'm talking about. So, that's me. Let's get started. So, I put a link in the chat. We're going to be using Newegg's PC part picker to build this for compatibility reasons and to also see what we want to get. There's also Micro Center has one, PC Part Picker has one. You can use whatever website you want. I just prefer Newegg's, and that's the one we're going to use. You can follow along at home if you want to. So from the website, the first thing you can do is you can select a pre-built. If you just want to do that, you can like pick a couple of the parts. But we're going to be going from scratch and picking all 9 of these. And that's going to get you a fully functioning PC minus peripherals like your monitor and your mouse. The first thing you want to do is start with either the CPU or the motherboard, because that's what's going to determine the rest of your pieces. Like if you pick an AMD processor, you need an AMD motherboard to go with it. Same thing with Intel. So let's start there. All right, so the first thing you want to pick is Intel or AMD. And I have a graphic we can pull up there. So these are the 2 manufacturers that make processors. You have to pick one. You can't mix them. You can't mix and match motherboards and processors. You have to stick with the same thing throughout the build. The biggest differences are here. So back in the day, Intel and AMD used to be very wide apart. Intel used to be the clear pick for the longest time, but AMD's been creeping up. The biggest thing you'll get with Intel over AMD is if you're strictly just trying to get the best gaming performance possible, Intel is going to give you a little edge over AMD. They're also better for overclocking if you're making your computer run faster than the manufacturer specifies. They've also got better drivers and software. But on the other hand, AMD is cheaper, it has better specifications, lower power consumption, better architecture, better security, so you kind of want to pick what's important to you. I personally go AMD, but I don't think anybody's wrong with picking Intel. And for the most part, we're going to be building my computer just so I can show you guys what I have. So the first thing you want to do here is pick Intel. And we're going to go AM4 socket because that's the newest one they have. And you'll see we have all these to pick from. Like, where do we start? The biggest thing you want to do is check how many cores you have and how much of a clock speed you get. That's going to determine your like power level. Back in the early 2000s, people used to only make a 1-core processor and trying to make that as fast as possible, trying to get as much gigahertz as you could get out of one processor. Then someone decided, what if we had 2 cores or 4 cores and had them each share the load, and you can get a much faster processor that way. So if you go to this Ryzen 9 5950 has 16 cores that go up to 4.9 gigahertz. This is going to be like the fastest thing on the market, and these actually just came out. But 16 core 4.9, if you're boosting, is a lot of power. Most people aren't going to get anywhere close to this. Like I have an 8 core 3.4 gigahertz, I believe it is. It's 3700X on here. It is not. But I have mine. I'm running a stream. I'm running Streamlabs. I'm running the game. I'm running Discord, and I only get about 25% of my load. So 16 cores for most people is going to be overdoing it, unless you're doing some like really high-end stuff. So for me, I'm going to pick this Ryzen 7 3800X. It's pretty close to the one I have. 8 core, 3.9 gigahertz. And if you want to do the math, you can actually pull up the calculator and do 3.9 times 8 cores. And that's kind of like a rough thing of what your processing power will be. Like if you take this 16 core times 4.9, you're going to get 78, which is way more than the one I've got right now. But it depends on what you want to do. So we're going to select this piece, and then we can go on to the motherboard. Now, you've got a million motherboards that are going to be compatible here with your AM4 socket. That's what it's going to filter out. You're not going to see any Intel motherboards on here, and you're going to get, what, 4+ pages of things you can choose from. Now, you're probably thinking, where do we start from? Let me pull up this little picture here. So we've got a $50 motherboard and a $350 motherboard on the left and right here. And you kind of get what you pay for here. The biggest thing is with the more expensive motherboard, you're going to get a better chipset, which means your computer is going to run a little bit faster, a little bit better than the cheaper one. And that's going to just do with the motherboard, not necessarily the pieces you get with it. The other thing on the cheaper one is you have these old school up here, the old mice and keyboard inputs. Like you've got a VGA input here. Like this is a bunch of like old stuff you don't really need. And it looks like it only has 4 USB ports. So stuff like that. There's only 2 slots for RAM, so if you ever wanted to add more than that, you're not going to be able to do it. This one probably doesn't even have support for anything above like 32 gigabits of RAM, so wouldn't really recommend this one for gaming. Now this one over here, it's got 4 slots for RAM. It's got 7 or 8 USB ports. I didn't even bother with the old school stuff because you're probably not going to be using it. This is going to be a lot faster than this one over here. I'm pretty sure this one has heat shields for your M.2 drive if you go that route. Right? 2 slots for AOL. So this is going to be the better board by like a mile, and I've kind of explained to you what the difference is between these two. So on here, you need to decide what you want. So like the thing you can filter out is your max memory. So like if you want to go 128 gigabytes, you'd want to go for one of those. Me personally, I like to not use Asus boards. That's just me. So I know some of the high-end boards are great, but I've been burnt by the lower-end boards many times. So like I like to stick with MSI and Gigabyte. So we can filter by that. And again, we didn't want any cheap boards, so let's look at the $100 to $300 range. And the other big thing, so form factor. If you want to build a mini computer, you need to make sure these are all micro or mini pieces. ATX is the full-size one, and you're going to have the easier time finding stuff like that. Alright, so we filtered it out. We have a choice between all of these. You can filter by price. Okay, so these are the lower ones, these are the better ones. Like, you'd pretty much be good with any of these boards. You can pick them based on, you know, if you want to have a pretty looking board, you can pick something with the colors you like, RGB, stuff like that. You can also compare the two on Micro Center's website and actually bring up different specs and see which one's going to be better for your price. But this Gigabyte Aorus is pretty close to the one I have right here. So we're going to go ahead and pick that one. And yeah, this is a good board. Alright, next thing is your memory. And this is your RAM. This is not your hard drive or anything like that. So let's go to that. Alright, we're going to get super technical here. So RAM stands for Random Access Memory. DDR4 is the newest technology, and DDR5 is supposed to come out by like 2022, but I mean, they've been kind of saying that for a while now, so I wouldn't really think that that's just right around the corner, but we'll see. So the biggest thing with these is if you have like a browser tab open, that's going to use your RAM. It's not going to try to save anything, it's just keeping it open while your computer's powered on. And as soon as you power off your computer, your RAM is going to dump itself. It's not going to save anything. The more things you have open, the more RAM you're going to need. If you're playing a game, if you've got Streamlabs open, if you've got YouTube running, if you've got a video downloading, it's going to require more and more RAM the more things you have open. The biggest thing here is... So DDR first came out in the year 2000 with DDR200. It had a 100 megahertz clock speed. Just straight up terrible. DDR4 has been out since 2014, and we're getting close to DDR5. When you're checking your pieces to pick from, DDR3200 is going to be the fastest one. So you can see the clock speed here is 1600, and the transfer rate is how many bits per second you can do. So 3200, that's going to be your fastest speed ever. And the transfer rate is always half of the clock speed. So if you want the fastest RAM, I would stick to one of these three, as long as your board's compatible, the 26 to the 32. So let's go in here. So if you go 8 gigabytes, you're kind of pushing it, because most games nowadays require somewhere in the 6 to 8 or more, and you can't really do anything else with it. So I'd recommend at least 16, but if you don't mind spending the extra money, go 32, and that's what I'm going to do. And usually the way they do this is 2 16 gigabyte chips, so you'd have 2 pieces in that add up to 32. We can filter by speed. Looks like they have 3600 now. That's crazy. So any of these like 3200 to 3600s are going to be where you want to go. And this is the part where you can pick like the different colors and stuff like that, because I mean you are building a computer that you're going to be looking at. These Tridents, the Corsairs, the G-Skills, these are all pretty good name brand stuff. I personally have Corsair in mine, so let's pick the Vengeance model. Technically mine has RGB, but I don't see that as an option on here right now. That might be sold out. But yeah, the Corsair Vengeance, 32 gigabyte, that's pretty much what I have. I'm pretty sure I have 3200 speed as well. Alright, so graphics card. If you're not building specifically a gaming PC, you do not need a graphics card. You can just use your onboard graphics to sort that out. The biggest thing here is NVIDIA versus AMD. They are both competing manufacturers to... This is the one you have to pick your graphics card from. So the newest one that AMD came out with is the Radeon RX 6000 series. The stats are up there for you to see. Historically, NVIDIA has been the better one to pick from of the two. They have better software and usually better hardware, but right now the Radeon actually has a little bit better than the 3080, which is over here. But I mean, you can pick and see what you want spec-wise. Like, if you want to pick the 3080, it's got 10 gigabytes of the G6 virtual memory, whereas this one has 16 gigabytes, so that's even more. But if you want to go to the 3090, that has 24. I mean, you gotta pick what you want in your computer. The other biggest thing, let me pull up YouTube real quick. You can find side-by-side videos where they take the two newest cards. Like, this is an older video because the newest one just came out. It's the NVIDIA 2080 on the left and the AMD equivalent on the right. And you can see different things like benchmarks, like your frames per second, the colors, like AMD might do brights a little bit better, NVIDIA might do grass a little bit better. And you can pull up one of these and see which one visually is more appealing to you, as well as the specs if you're just trying to get technical and trying to get the best thing you can get out of it. But I mean, these videos are how I also picked my first one. You can see the GPU's temperature, as well as the frames per second, how much the CPU has to go to keep up with the graphics card, and then just visually what you can see. And I mean, they have all the newest games in here. They're not testing old games, they're testing stuff that just came out. But I mean, yeah, do your research, try to see which one looks better for you. I'm an NVIDIA man, but I wouldn't fault you for getting the new AMD. That looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and copy paste this video in here if you guys want to watch it on your own time. Alright. So, because I like NVIDIA, I'm going to pick a NVIDIA one. So let's pick the 30 series, which is the newest one. And of course they're all sold out right now because the holidays are coming out and these ones have been in pretty low demand. So again, just like the motherboard, you have to pick which manufacturer you want. NVIDIA makes their own. It's the Founders Edition, but they're usually pretty hard to come by. But Gigabyte, MSI, Asus, Zotac, like they all make their own. Me personally, I would not pick Zotac or PNY. They're kind of the lower end company on these. They'll still be good, but I would pick something like EVGA, MSI, Gigabyte. And then decide if you want a 3080, a 3070, or a 3090. The 3080 is going to be the middle one. That's going to be kind of the best of both worlds. The 3070 is on the lower end if you want a new graphics card but don't want to spend an extra $300, and the 3090s if you want to go all the way. So like I have the Founders Edition. I don't think it's going to pop up here, but if I had my pick, I would pick an EVGA one. So one of these two with the RGB. This one right here, $809. Pretty pricey, but the graphics card is going to be the most expensive part of your build. All right, to the case. So like the biggest thing here is because we picked an ATX motherboard and that's the kind of size we're going to do on here, we need to go ahead and make sure we have the ATX case size, otherwise it's not going to fit in here. And this, for the most part, is just purely cosmetic. Whatever case looks good to you, that's fine. Just make sure it's roomy enough that you can get everything in there without making it too small. And just read reviews, see what people are doing, see if they had problems getting their stuff in there too. Me personally, I use an NZXT H510, which I don't know if I can actually search for in the builder, unless I want to go through the whole thing. All right, let's do that. NZXT H510. Okay, so yeah, these are the ones I use. The nice thing about this one specifically is this underneath part right here. That's where you put your power supply and all the cords go, and you can wrap it around the back and out through this little bar right here. It's very good for case management. It's very compact. Things are a little tight, but it's not ridiculous. Sometimes when you're putting things in and out, you kind of have to go a little extra and pull the back out and get all the pieces in there, but it looks good when it's done. So yeah, this is the one I'd recommend. They actually make a bigger one, the H710. If you want a little bit more room to work around with, that's fine. But again, this is purely cosmetic. Go through all of Newegg's or Micro Center's ones and go see which one looks the best to you, because I mean that's what it's all about. So yeah, let's pick one of these as my case. All right, on to the power supply. This is usually bugged. Let's see if it's still bugged. It is. Okay, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and go to Newegg. We'll just go ahead and do this. Power supplies. Okay, so this is what actually runs your computer, or actually powers everything. This box will have a bunch of cords in it that you plug into every piece of the motherboard to make sure everything gets powered, including your case, like your lights and stuff. Also the power button. The biggest thing you want here is you want to make sure it's ATX, because that's the same thing. We're trying to make everything good. And kind of stick to the name brand ones. Like Corsair and EVGA are usually the two I recommend. Let's take that off. Okay. So yeah, these are all the ones I'd recommend. They actually come with different ratings, like bronze, silver, gold. Go for the gold, spend a little extra money. This is going to be powering your computer for hopefully 10 years. That's usually when the warranties run out. Spend the extra dollars. It's definitely going to be worth it. The other thing you need to do is pick which wattage you want. So depending on what you pick, so like if you pick a 3080 graphics card, they recommend you have at least 750 watts. So I'd start there. If you add water cooling or anything, lots of RGB lights, it's going to increase how much you need. So try to go a little bit over than under. If you go under, your computer might shut off or might not even turn on. So I'd pick somewhere in like can we pick the 750s? Yeah. 750 watts usually what I do. And this one right here is actually the one I have. It's the EVGA 80 Gold Plus. So my recommendation. But I mean, you can go through here and pick all the ones you want. Some of these are kind of weird and have RGB stuff. You're not going to be able to see it in the case in most cases. So I don't know why you'd go for this. I mean, if you got a spot where you can see it, great. But pick something gold rated. Pick something with the wattage you need. There's nothing too much crazy about that. I mean, you can get what you pay for the price. You can build one for $500, but I mean, you're going to be kind of skimping on stuff because like the graphics card alone in my build's $800. If you want it to be decent, I'd say somewhere in like the $1,500 to $2,000 range, and that's going to last you at least 5 years. And you can go ahead and just replace pieces rather than have to build an entire new computer every couple years when you're doing that too. Because like your power supply is going to last you for hopefully 10 years. When you buy a new computer, you have to buy a new power supply. But if you're upgrading, you don't have to worry about stuff like that. All right, let's go back to my builder. So yeah, power supply for some reason is bugged on Newegg. I don't know when they're going to fix that, but you can just buy that piece separately. Hey, thanks for the sub. Appreciate it. So the next thing we're going to do is storage. So there's two options. There's hard drives and solid state drives. And there's also different variations of these. So a hard disk drive, the HDD, is going to be your cheapest option. It has literal moving pieces, kind of like a record player. It's got 2 discs and a little handle that spins around and actually goes through and reads your data that way. These things are slow, but they're cheap. That's the thing. If you just need cheap, bountiful storage, get a hard drive. The next level up is a solid state hybrid drive. It's got a mixture of moving and non-moving pieces. It's like an upgraded version of a hard drive. That's why they're not very much more expensive than that. And then the next level is solid state drives. These have no moving pieces. You don't have to worry about mechanical failure on these. They're going to be more expensive, but they're going to be faster. And then the newest technology is the M.2, and this is going to be the fastest thing you can do. This will load your games with basically the fastest loading screens possible. Everything's going to boot up super fast. If you put your operating system on here, it's going to boot up immediately. The reason why the M.2 is so fast is because it has no wires to go through. This just clips directly into your motherboard. So if you're going to be gaming, I recommend the M.2. You can also do mix and match, do an M.2 for your games and the SSD for like the OS and something else, your movies, your pictures, stuff like that. So on here, we're going to pick solid state. It's only going to give you an option to pick one thing, but we're going to pick then M.2. The 2280 is usually the most universal size. And again, your memory is like super important, so I'd pick something name brand. So like Samsung, Western Digital, what others on here? Like there's a million companies, but like you don't want your memory to fail. That's like the biggest thing here. So Samsung, Western Digital. The blue version is usually for security cameras, so you want to stick to the black on them. That's a little tidbit here. The other thing, I'd recommend 2 terabytes because some games really eat up your space and you don't want to have to keep upgrading. Just spend the extra money up front and be good. So like this Samsung 970 EVO is actually the one I've got. This thing actually, can I read the stats on here? Yeah, this thing reads and writes at 3.5 gigabytes per second. Like that is insanely fast. And it's guaranteed for 1.5 million hours. I mean, this thing is great. It weighs 8 grams. And it came out last year, so there you go. This is the one I'd recommend. If you want a little bit less, if you're only going to play a game for a little bit, uninstall it, get a 1 terabyte, that's fine too. I personally recommend a 2 terabyte one of this and then another 2 terabyte solid state drive if you're going to put extra stuff on there, kind of like I do. So we'll select that. All right. So now your cooler type, you have 2 choices. You can do water cooling or fans and a heatsink. So the biggest thing on these, the water cooling is going to be more expensive and it's going to be a little more technical to put in. A lot of people are afraid for some reason that a water cooler is going to break and spray the gel over their computer, and that doesn't really happen. Everyone knows somebody who knows somebody that's happened to, but I've never actually met anybody where this has actually happened. The other route, the cheaper route, is case fans and a heatsink. So this is actually a heatsink right here. It attaches directly to the processor with thermal paste. It pulls the hot air out and comes out the fan. Whereas water cooling, you attach this piece to the processor. The cool gel comes in, absorbs the heat through one tube, comes out the other one, and blows out the fans where the gel cools back down, and just keeps that cycle going. You get better temperatures for here for gaming. If you're not gaming, I'd recommend the heatsink is fine, or if you don't want to be too technical. But for me, I like water cooling. So I'd recommend a water cooler and like 2 or 3 case fans, depending on which case you get, just to keep everything cool. You don't want things overheating. And for the most part, this is just, you can read reviews, pick which one you like. I like the NZXT ones. I have a Kraken X42, which is kind of like this one. It's got the RGB, so you can pick the colors on the NZXT, stuff like that. It actually recommends, with the case I've got, the H510. This is the Elite, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. But yeah, it'll put things like your fan speed, how cool it'll get it, stuff like that. You can just read all about these and see which one you like. But I did my research, and that's the one I like. All right, operating system. So Linux is free. Let's just put that out there. But Linux requires you to be... You don't like the NZXT IO? I personally haven't had any problem with mine, but some people... Yeah, I have heard that a couple times. But I mean, you can do your research. You can actually do something like... here, let's do this real quick. Top water cooling 2020. And like a bunch of these websites will have like different things you can read to see what you like. This is not a good website. Yeah. Okay, so like right here, their best liquid cooling is a Corsair H115i. You can read by there. They've actually got a heatsink on here. The Noctuas are actually pretty good. The EVGA ones at affordable price if you're worried about overspending. Looks like it's $100, and you can go through here and do your research yourself. And you guys are good. Ask questions. Like I'm here for that. Okay, back to the operating system real quick. So Linux is free. You do need to be a little tech savvy because they kind of make you do everything yourself. But Linux has no restrictions like Windows does. Like if you want to have your clocks, like on my dual monitors, the clock shows up in both corners. There's no way to change that. On Linux, you can put it in one corner. You can put it in the top right corner. You can do anything. Linux is the playground for people who know what they're doing. For everybody else, it's kind of just Windows. Because you can't really do a Mac OS if you're building your own computer. So here's my recommendation. You can get a Windows 10 install file for free online. Download that onto a USB and have your computer boot to that for the first time, and then buy a key separately. That's going to save you so much money because this is literally like $100 if you want to do this on here. You can buy a key for literally like $15-20. It's going to be a tiny bit, like 5% harder to do it this way, but it's going to save you so much money. But I mean, let's go ahead and select that just because we'll make sure this is all filled out when we actually do that. Your last little bit is your peripherals. So like your monitor, your keyboard, your mouse, if you want a headset, thermal paste, if you're gonna do a heat sink or a water cooling, it'll usually come with thermal paste, but double check to make sure it doesn't. And then case fans. So starting with the monitor, you got to pick your size. If you're gaming, I recommend somewhere in the 24 to 27, because if you're playing like a competitive or shoot or something, you don't want to have to actually move your head or move your eyes too much. When you can just focus on everything on your screen once, you'll have a much better time. So me personally, I like the 27s. So let's do that. So you start with your size. The next thing you want to do is if you want it in 1080p, 2K, or 4K, True, you can do Windows without a key, but you'll have some issues. For the most part, though, I would just spend the $20 on the key. So 1080p, 2K, 4K. This is your resolution. This is how things are going to look. A lot of users like 1080p because you can get a faster frame rate on your computer, but I'd recommend the 2K to the 4K because it just looks nicer. Like you want to, if you're going to be gaming, have a good time with it. Next thing, your response time. So you want a low response time so you can be competitive. So somewhere in like the 3 to 1 to 0 milliseconds, that's where you kind of want to be. Like it, somewhere like 3 to 5 milliseconds doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're playing competitive shooters, that time does add up. Let's see. That's pretty much where you want to start, and then you can filter out the brands you like. I like MSI, Gigabyte, Samsungs are all good. And then the last thing you have is your refresh rate. This is how many frames per second you'll get while you're gaming, maximum, of course. So like right here, you got a 240, you can get up to 240 frames per second with this monitor with a 1 millisecond response time. But you're going to pay for it. This thing is $700. Whereas if you go to the 170 hertz option, it's almost half. But I mean, pick what you want. I'd recommend these kind of specs and then kind of figure out what frame rate you want. Like 60 is unacceptable. 120 is good. And then like the 140 to 165 and up is kind of where you want to be. Because when you're playing like a competitive shooter or any kind of competitive game, getting that slight edge on people who have the lower end equipment, this is going to add up. So is mine actually on here? Yeah, the Gigabyte Aorus, this is the one I actually have right here. $400. It's the 165 hertz, 1 millisecond. This is great. And NVIDIA actually just announced that they're going to do a 360 hertz monitor sometime next year, which is kind of insane, but I mean, it's going to be out there for people who want to do it. Gaming keyboards. Me personally, a keyboard's a keyboard. Pick one you like, pick one that looks cool. You can pick mechanical keys if you want to make the sound. You can pick a silent one. You can pick one that lights up. The biggest thing is, for the most part, this won't really affect your gaming that much. Unless you want to get one of the custom ones. Like they have little like hexagon ones that have like 12 programmable buttons. Those ones are going to be pretty good for shooters because you don't have as many buttons to deal with. You don't have to move your hand as much when you're doing stuff like that. You can do a Bluetooth keyboard. I prefer wired just because I'm worried about things not working and a little bit more stability. But I mean, yeah, like go through these. You can actually go to stores. They'll have them set up. Pick whichever one you want. I'll just pick one at random. That isn't $200. Corsair is good. $70. Sounds great. All right, your mouse. This one actually does matter more than your keyboard. So the biggest thing here is your DPI. That's your, was it dots per inch? Yeah, I think that's what it is. This is how much sensitivity you're going to have. Something with a low DPI is going to take longer to move across your screen than something with a higher DPI. And most of the time, these are going to be programmable where you can actually physically set your DPI to whatever you're comfortable with. But if it has a better maximum, you can make it more sensitive. So like with shooters, you want a higher sensitivity, so you got to do stuff like that. The other thing is buttons. So depending on which mouse you get, it'll have side buttons that you can program. So like if you want to have like reload be one of those, you can click on that without worrying about it on your keyboard. And then obviously RGB stuff if you want to worry about that. Corsair is good, Logitech's good. What else do they have on here? Yeah, Razer, SteelSeries, Logitech. Like these are the ones I kind of stick with. And decide how many buttons you want. Make sure it's got that good DPI. Like these are all gaming mice, so like, you know, I wouldn't recommend 2500. That's going to be kind of low. I'm pretty sure I have mine set to 7000, so you'd want at least 8000 on here. But I mean, more is better because like you can set 7000 on a 16000 DPI. Just pick whichever one you want. The Razer Death Adder, I think, is the one I have, just not this specific one. Because I think mine is the newer one, which isn't popping up here for right now, but yeah. That's fine. We'll pick that. And that is pretty much my computer. This thing is at $2,600, and the biggest thing is going to be because I've got that $800 graphics card in here. You can skimp on that and get something like a 2000 series that's going to be about half the price, and then just kind of upgrade every couple years. Usually a brand new graphics card is good for 5+ years. That's kind of what I've been getting out of mine. So that's what I would assume you'd get out of yours. So if you get a 2000 series in like 2 or 3 years when the 4000 series comes out, that's when I would upgrade. And just kind of keep current with that if you want to have a competitive gaming PC. Or you can wait until the 3000 series drops in price and try to get one of those maybe a couple years after. Yeah, if you can find a 3080, which is the biggest thing. There's actually a Discord group I'm a part of that I had alerts set up every time Newegg or Amazon had one in stock. We'd all get an alert. It was just a mad dash trying to get that going. But yeah, that is my list. Do we have any other questions before I go for this? Give you guys a few minutes. Yeah, some websites are being shady, trying to say like, "Oh, you know, we've received your order," and then they'll never actually send it out to you because they're just waiting for more, and they don't know when that's going to be. This is my high-end computer. This is pretty close to what I actually have in mind. So mine's going to be somewhere in the 2600 range. If you're gaming, I would recommend 27 inches. And I also just recommend 27 inches in general. That's a good monitor size. Curved screen is fine. You want at least 120 hertz, which is going to be your frames per second, somewhere that above, and then under 3 milliseconds for response time. And you can put all those into Newegg's filter and kind of pick which ones you want. Yeah, and then 2K is like the minimum. You can get a 1080p monitor, but if you have them side by side, it's going to look like trash. That's what I did. I got a 1080p and a 2K, and I couldn't stand the 1080p after looking at them side by side. And probably a 4K is going to look even better, but I mean, 4Ks are going to be more expensive. And a lot of, specifically for gaming, a lot of games aren't really ready for 4K. Yeah, 1080p is kind of like a 5 years ago thing. Like, it's okay for like some things, but I wouldn't recommend it anymore now. Kind of stay in the 2K to 4K range. 4K if you can afford it. And if you guys stumble across this video and have any other questions while I'm playing some other game or something like that, feel free to ask me. I don't mind. Keeps the chat going. Yeah, 24 inches is fine too. Somewhere in the 24 to 27 is where you want to be at. Victor actually just got a 32. My other person who I play COD with, and it's big. Like, you don't want to have to rely on your peripherals too much. You just kind of want to see everything. But his biggest thing is he's our sniper. He wants the biggest screen possible so he can zoom in and be like this close to his screen. But you know, you do you, I guess. Or if you're blind, yeah, yeah. If you want a 32 inch because you're blind, that's fine too. Well, if you want to play something like Among Us, you definitely need a 3090 because I mean, come on, you don't want to get killed in electrical while your computer's still rendering everything. Yeah, the 32 is already pushing it. I couldn't imagine a 34. All right, that looks like it's pretty much it. Yeah, if you guys have any more questions, you can feel free to DM me, or I'm going to put this on YouTube. You can comment on there. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys learned something. If you have any more questions, just let me know.